Welcome to Podcast Movement 2023.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here. Hi Dan. So we're about to talk about a decade of defiance, and just to frame it a little bit, Dan, Miranda, and myself came from AM radio. So going back 10 years, when we worked in radio, it was starting to lose its appeal because it was challenging for advertisers to break in that were looking to disrupt and have an impact. There were set time clocks. There were strict FCC rules and regulations, like the 7 words to not say. There was limited content and formats outside of the national shows and hosts like Leo Laporte or Handle on the Law, because everything was cookie cutter, market to market. They were just playing the hits. And it was a high barrier to entry for advertisers because everything was so expensive to partner with an endorsement and partner with a host that was really going to stand behind the brand. The good thing about podcasts, besides this nose-picking behavior being acceptable, was that there was specialized content. There were no FCC rules or regulations. There was no bureaucracy. And it gave the hosts the freedom to create content that people wanted to listen to. It also lowered the barrier to entry for advertisers because it wasn't expensive to partner with talent that was going to give them an authentic endorsement and really change the world and disrupt. The last 10 years have been crazy, but I'm going to pass it over to Dan to tell you specifically how we got here.
Hi, guys. It's good to see everybody who's still here. These are the true believers. When are your flights? Who's been here for 10 years in the industry, working in the podcast business for 10 years or longer? Raise your hand high. Okay, we got some. Okay, good. Congratulations. So a lot of this will probably resonate with you. And we all came in for different reasons. Some of us did it for commercial reasons. Some of us did it for passion, and sometimes a bit of both. But what we're going to do is we're going to run through our perspective now that we've been in business with Oxford Road for 10 years. We're going to share our perspective on what's changed in a decade and what's good about the changes and what's not as good about the changes, and what do we need to do to be prepared for the 10 years that are coming next? Because I think the industry is really at an inflection point. By the way, first of all, if you're in the back, how well can you hear me? Give a thumbs up if totally cool, you can hear everything I'm saying. Okay. This is my first session that I've heard or participated in because I got in like an hour ago. I dropped my daughter off at college last night and just moved her in. So like 18 hours ago, I was ugly crying on a field at Chapman University. But we had the slot, and they were willing to accommodate me, and we have a lot we want to share with you guys. I think it's important. So thank you for making the time. So 10 years, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the differences we've seen and where we're at and what we see in the future. And we're going to share some feedback that we've gotten directly from the brands. I know largely the audience at this event, at Podcast Movement, it's always very publisher heavy, which is good. It's good that we have a focus and that we get to kind of sort out a lot of open issues. But we've gotten a lot of feedback lately from the brands that pay for everything. And so we want to not only share our own thoughts, but share some of their thoughts with you. So we're going to recap that in this 30-minute session. If we have extra time, would love to do a Q&A. Because you've made the time to come share this with us, we're going to hang out afterwards. I don't leave till tomorrow, so I know most of you have to run to the airport, but if you got time, you want to talk about anything, I'm here. So thank you guys for making this time. Gary showed you the picture. That was us in a WeWork in 2013. Now, some of us came out of radio, and a lot of the agency folks that started in the podcast industry came out of radio. Gary joined me in 2010, and Miranda came on in 2011. And so they have really helped pioneer what has become a lot of the podcast industry. Gary, who was just up here speaking, has brought in some businesses that really helped form the pillars on which the industry was built. So, for example, Gary was pitching the ZipRecruiter founders when there were 3 people subleasing an office, followed up with them for years until they finally accepted that podcast and audio was something that could help them grow their business. And we watched them go to become the leading advertiser in audio. So, we've had a chance to get a front row seat to a lot of stuff. And this is what was going on when we started, okay? I like to say the podcast is the new rock and roll, or at least it has been. How long it's going to stay that way, we'll see. These are some of the founding fathers, the patriarchy you see up here. There's 4 guys. You got Joe Rogan, Leo Laporte, Mark Maron, and Adam Carolla. What was interesting here is that they all came in about 10, 12, 13 years ago, and they were the first people that were successful in media to actually leave a traditional media job and go all in on podcasts. Before that, it was just hobbyists. There really wasn't an industry. But what they did was they said, we can't really make a go of it because they had unique content that didn't necessarily fit into the conventional boxes. For example, when we were in radio, we worked with Leo Laporte. All he could do in radio, the furthest he could scale his business, which was a tech show, was to have a weekend, sorry, I'm adapting to the audio a little bit. He had a tech show that you could only run on the weekends because it was too niche to run Monday through Friday. So he had a very small audience, and he needed to be nationally syndicated to even make it big enough that it would make sense for an advertiser to put ads in it. Mark Maron was part of Air America. That was the left-wing answer to conservative talk radio. Okay, he had a afternoon drive show on a local station that we represented, and we couldn't sell ads in his show for $25 a spot. Think about what it costs now to be in Mark Maron. So when Gary was talking earlier about how the barriers to entry came down, what happened was, instead of having to compete in your local market, and there's really only a few subjects you can talk about, all of a sudden you can find an audience anywhere and build a tribe around something that somebody's interested in. So there were disruptive personalities that said, I want to go there, I want to be a part of that revolution. And there were no ratings. So you couldn't sell it to conventional brands and advertisers. So what happened? You saw a parade of D2C brands, disruptive companies, usually VC-backed. They didn't care about ratings. It didn't matter to them. What they cared about was, could I spend money? Could I get an ROI? Is there some way that I can kind of measure that, even without pixels? And so that was the foundation of this industry that we're in. 2014, a year after we started, Serial came out. This was the shot heard around the world, because this is when we no longer had to explain to people what a podcast was. I'd tell people what I did for a living, and they'd be like, what? What's a podcast? But when Serial came out, neighbors started talking about it. Everybody started to know what it was, and that it was actually important. It was culturally relevant. They got somebody who had been convicted of murder that was serving a prison sentence, freed from prison. And that made a lot of noise. And we all know about the rating, 300 million ratings, lots of awards, but people started paying attention, and bigger dollars, bigger media organizations started saying, there's gold in them, our hills, we're coming in. So just a quick view of the numbers. Most of you guys know this history, but it's interesting when you just zoom out and look what happened in a decade, okay? You had about 32 million listeners in 2015. We can't tell you about 2013 because nobody was paying attention. We can't tell you about revenue in 2015. I saw a stat that said we did 30 million as an industry in 2014, and today we're knocking up against $2 billion. So the other thing that happened was a lot of big players started coming in. First, it was iHeart when they bought the Stuff network in 2018. And then everybody started piling in, not just Spotify. We saw Fang moving in through Amazon, and some really big M&A activity started to happen. Okay, so what happens next? The insurgents who went here for the freedom, for the ability to talk without being bound to clocks and having to be told what words they can and can't say and what subjects, they're going to cover, they become the establishment over time, and they start to lose their edge. You can see some of these folks, like I said, podcasts, the new rock and roll, and most people start to change, and they start to water down what they do. Some of that's a good thing, and some people, stay who they are the whole time. Snoop is still hanging out with felons, apparently. This is what happened to the old audio industry and the new audio industry. Take it in. You know what happened. Let's be honest about what happened here, okay? We've been using, I'm an expat from radio. It is what it is, okay? It wasn't cool. There was nothing cool happening in radio. The biggest innovation from 10 years of working in terrestrial radio was that we started selling 30-second spots. That was the big innovation, okay? So this changed everything, all right? All of a sudden, now we've got a story. And so radio decided I can church it up a little bit. We need to get in on this podcast thing. And it was just big enough to start doing that. Then COVID happened, and people got time on their hands, and people needed to start recording things, but they couldn't leave their houses. So what'd they do? Everybody started a podcast. We had presidents. We had Bruce Springsteen. We had Kardashians. We had Goop founders. And all the A-list came in, right? But what happened? What happened? We got opportunists. We got a lot of corporate dollars chasing something really, really precious and special and intimate that brought us all here, and starting to push it and find the edges of how commercially viable is this thing and what will the industry really support. Turned out it couldn't support as much as we thought. Okay, so we were definitely a seller's market. And you had sellers that didn't really have to sell at all. And in some cases, being on the buying end, it kind of felt like people were doing us a favor if they let us buy inventory. Things got really inflexible. These minimum guarantees, because of the arms race to gather talent, really started becoming a problem, and we all became hostages to it, no matter what side of the equation you're on. We all had to chase those big contracts. Now we're in the post-COVID economy. What happened? We kind of said, all right, everybody, we got to get back to work. We got to start looking at our P&L. We have to actually show that this will pencil eventually. We're still going to be dealing with this for a while because such big commitments were made by so many. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think this is a good thing. And I think that, bringing fiscal responsibility back to the industry is actually going to separate the wheat from the chaff. A lot of the opportunists that came in just to exploit the opportunity, they're leaving, and they probably need to leave because the industry can't support that. We can only do so many multi-hundred-million-dollar contracts that we can actually pay off over time. And so we're moving into a new era. We're moving into the age of efficiency. What does everybody want? They want computers to do it. We've got AI. We've got ChatGPT. And we're trying to figure out how many of us are going to have any value doing what we do today in 5 years or in 10 years. And we have to ask ourselves, what value do we bring to the party? What do we do to stay relevant? What do we do to continue to contribute value in an industry that's getting so efficient that you don't need humans to manage a lot of it? So we have things like brand safety. And by the way, I'm not saying this is bad or good necessarily. I think there's a lot of this that is really good and a lot of this that comes with a lot of very negative byproducts. And that's why I wanted you guys here. That's why I'm really grateful that you're sitting here with us. I think we need to be open about it. Brand safety is a beautiful thing. It could just be an insurance policy so advertisers have somebody to blame if somebody says something that they get in trouble for. That's kind of the worst case scenario for how it's used. But it's important because when you have user-generated content and people can say anything to anyone with no FCC governance, brands can get in trouble, okay? Synthetic voice, this is a double-edged sword. We haven't really scratched the surface with it. When you're taking a podcast and now you're able to offer it to other countries and people that speak other languages that would have never had a way to hear your message, I think that's a good thing. But when you get synthetic voicing ads that the host may have never even heard about and we're brokering trust that they've built with their audience and kind of perverting that by having them recommend something they didn't actually recommend and don't actually believe in, that's a bad thing. Programmatic, everybody wants programmatic. I don't know how many panels were about programmatic or talked about it here, but I'll bet a lot. And programmatic is a good thing because it makes the industry operate more efficiently. in many ways. And there has to be a way to require marketers to push fewer buttons in order to place a buy. But let's be honest, what is this doing? It's extracting the human connection. It is making it so efficient that we lose some of the intimacy and some of the power that brought brands here in the first place. A double-edged sword. Verification, Pete's here. Everybody knows Pete. If you're not signed up with PodScribe, you probably should be. We're investors in PodScribe, so we are biased in saying that, but we do believe it. And what's good about verification is that now we're starting to call for receipts on what we bought. We want to know, this is what we paid for, this is what we expected. Did it happen according to spec? There has to be a way to reconcile that. And in that way, technology is wonderful. I don't even want to start on AI, because I don't think most of us can even conceive of where it's going. The way I try to think about it, just to even understand what we're even talking about, I think about like virtual reality, but with sound. We're going to be able to choose our own adventure. We're going to be able to have content the way we want it. If we want it to just agree with us, we can kind of do that now. We're going to be able to do that more. If we're interested in a subject, we can go deep into that subject. If you only have 14 minutes to listen to your 8-hour Rogan show, you can have it synthesized. It's going places that I think are really, really hard for us to even discuss because it's so big and it's going to be so disruptive in the future. But that's why I think we need to pause and we need to think a little bit and we need to talk. Everything's going artificial. You know that. You hear the robots marching. And they are coming for your job. They're coming for my job. They're coming for all of our companies. And that's life. That's machines. It's always been that way. I think we have to embrace that. But what happens in an industry that is built on a foundation of trust, on hosts talking about something that is deeply important to them, and making recommendations to do business with people that they trust? And then all of a sudden, we're going from brokering authenticity and connection, and we're substituting that with tech, with impersonal, with efficiency, with robots. Not everything that is artificial belongs in an authentic media like audio. A lot of it does. It's our job to figure out the difference. We're at a crossroads right now where we have to ask ourselves, for everything we're pursuing, everything that we're doing, where do we want to move toward the artificial because it's going to help advance our missions? Where do we want to move towards the authentic? Where do we actually deliberately want to be less efficient? There are some things that you do the old-fashioned way because it means more, because it's too important. It's too important. I had to show up late because I wanted to be there in person to drop my daughter off at college. I could have sent her a text. I could have slacked with her about it, could have programmed a message to go to her. That's not relationship. And we are in a relationship business, like it or not. And so we can't confuse the fact that programmatic is important and artificial intelligence is critical for our own survival. We have to use these tools, but we don't want to be used by them. Here's what we did a month ago to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. We thought about throwing a big party for ourselves, and we decided to take a different approach. What we did was we brought together the people we're calling the chief audio officers, the people whose necks are on the line to make their audio program successful on behalf of a brand. These are the people that pay all of our bills. And we got about 50 of them to come to LA, and we had 3 events in about a day and a half. And we started talking to them and asking them, what's important to you about measurement? What's important to you about the way that we're buying? What's important to you about creative? We talked about everything. We gave them the floor. We learned some interesting things. And so what we're going to do is conclude by sharing some of those thoughts with you, because I think it's very relevant to hear from the masters whom we all serve, the marketers, about what's important to them. These are some of the logos. Here's our ask, and to do our asks, if you'll imagine that apostrophe going the other way, these are our asks. I'm going to bring up somebody who's very, very knowledgeable that has also been a cornerstone of this industry. And if you haven't caught her on another panel, I'm really glad you get to hear from her. Miranda, come on up. She runs media for Oxford Road and has been here since the beginning.
Yes. Okay, so let's start with clear measurement standards. So we have 3 things within clear measurement. So the first thing, and Dan, I think maybe you need to, this looks like, okay, so first and foremost, third-party verification. So if you were here on Tuesday at 5, you heard me and several other buyers talk about this. Podcasting will never capture its full share of media allocation without third-party verification. It would bring podcasting to parity with other media channels. 3PV helps advertisers and it helps publishers understand the metrics, avoid fraud, and reduce wasted ad dollars by ensuring campaigns are reaching their intended audience. It brings credibility to the industry, and it helps the data that we get from 3PV. It helps empower insights that help optimize performance. So third-party verification, it brings accountability and transparency, all things that we need to help scale the industry. The next thing is listen-through rate. So as most of you know, actual listens, like actual impressions, valid impressions, and reporting on them, it's not possible with RSS feeds at the core of delivery. But there are other ways for us to get closer to the truth through metrics and data points like listen-through rates. I know publishers and some podcasters are somewhat protective over that data and reporting on it. It's nuanced, it'll require new processes, but this is what we need to establish that transparency and credibility. And then the last thing is placement transparency. So one of the most common frustrations that I hear and common complaints from other buyers in the market is just the lack of transparency in terms of how buys are being structured. I think this is for a couple different reasons. I think lack of education, lack of standardization, but also things are just seem to be changing frequently. So as an example, when I started first buying podcasts 10 years ago, baked in meant that it was live and it lived in the episode forever and you couldn't remove it. And when the industry, most of the industry migrated over to dynamic ad insertion, and they started dynamically inserting ads, charging them at a flat rate and serving them in specific episodes, publishers were classifying them as baked in. Some still do. That's confusing. They're called the same thing, but yet executed completely different. And that's just one of many examples of the confusions that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And it takes a lot of time. It wastes a lot of time. This is time that we could be using to actually invest and scale and grow our business together. And so I just urge publishers to make sure that throughout your organization, but specifically on the front lines, you're really taking time to educate specifically sellers on all of the different ways that buys are executed, but specifically their own.
Now I got 2 mics. Here, I'm going to give you one.
Okay.
All right. We got 6 minutes and 27 seconds, and then we can hang out. We talked about measurement standards. Second of 3 points we want to bring up to you guys is responsible content, not restricted content. You see 4 logos on here, okay? Oxford Road has consulted with, advocated for, invested in 3 of the ones at the bottom and currently are engaged in a partnership with Seeker, where last month we launched something called the Civility Score. This is an important topic for us. And one of the reasons is because I was mentioning earlier, we came here because of the revolutionary idea that we wanted to be a part of a platform where people could say what they think and what's interesting to them and voice their views in an open forum without unnecessary restriction. We're losing some of that. And what we saw happen in 2020, I mean, we've always had controversy in spoken word formats. 10 years in radio, there's always somebody that's in trouble for something. But it got a little crazy a couple years ago when you got millions of shows and people saying whatever they want and brands putting their voice behind it and aligning their mission with things that they don't necessarily feel reflect their values. So what we started seeing happening in the market was brands started retreating from content that might be interesting or might be important or might be responsibly executed, but they couldn't tell the difference. So they would cancel programs, pure guilt by association, out of fear because they had no metrics to measure. So we started really investigating this deeply. We did a podcast just to deal with this. Our podcast, the Media Roundtable, for 2 years, focused on talking to creators and people across the ecosystem to say, how do we deal with this? Why are we so divided? Why are we fighting about everything? And what is our part in this? Where are we to blame? And what we concluded is that media needs nutrition labels. We have it for consumer products. We need it for media. And we need to let people make their own choices. They need to be able to make up their own minds, but they need more information to be able to do that, and nothing existed. So we partnered with all of these groups to bring new tools to the marketplace so that brands could assess what they're doing and be able to make informed decisions and not out of fear. For me personally, okay, this is beyond just business economics, but I think democracy is good for business. I think when we have a strong democracy, we all make more money. So I think there's a payoff here. But I think it's very, very dangerous when we have a culture that makes certain subjects unmentionable because it might say the wrong thing that might go into the wrong area and might upset people because somebody holds a view. That doesn't mean everybody deserves sponsorship. But we don't want to cut people off from having a voice, and we want to know the difference between when Alex Jones is talking about a topic or when Oprah's talking about a topic. There's a difference in the person who's talking about it, and some people are more responsible and can be trusted with these things. Brands need to know that. I'm really proud of the most recent launch we did with Seeker on the civility score. And we have some folks here from Seeker. Pat in the back, raise your hand if you want to talk to him after. Let me just explain to you what this is. Using AI, they were able to take transcripts and figure out the volume and severity of personal attacks. When you attack an individual, or you attack a group of individuals, or you attack what we might call protected classes, people that are more vulnerable in our society, you get a score. It's very objective. It doesn't matter what your opinions are, what side of the aisle you're on. It's just about, are you attacking people or not? Because I think brands need to know that. That doesn't mean we should silence them. That doesn't mean we need to deplatform them, but we need them informed so they can decide what's their tolerance level. And if we can move the carrot in our medium, okay, forget the internet. It's gone. But in podcasts, we're still young enough to get this right. We can figure out a way to allow for responsible discussion of the things that are most important to us in our lives and in our culture in responsible ways and reward that with advertising dollars. And that should be a good thing. And I think brands want that. They just need the tools to do it. So the civility score from Seeker is a way that we're taking a step to just simplify things a little bit. I know we're a little bit GARM dependent. If you look at the framework for that, it's a little complex. It's hard to apply. So we just wanted to start with one simple first step to say, are we at least practicing the golden rule on this show? Because if so, brands are probably going to be okay there. Everything else will fall into place. That's the second ask. I'll go faster on the third, because we've been talking about this. I like to call it our Save the Live Reads campaign. 1, 1, and 1. I guess they're all of equal importance. Save the Live Reads. It's kind of weird to even call it a live read because podcasts are pre-produced, but it's live when it's taped. And what's happened is we've gotten so fixated on dynamic insertion and so fixated on programmatic and trying to inject as many units as we can per hour until the advertisers scream. That's the business model. But that's not what sells product and services, and that's not what engenders trust. So what we believe is that you can have it both ways. There are big brands that are never going to give their copy over to a host and let them interpret it as they see fit. You're never going to have that from Madison Avenue, okay? But there are brands who actually built this industry and want to continue to support this industry that believe in that and believe that when you trust a host where there's value alignment, you can give them points and let them actually integrate it into their content in an authentic, organic way, and it'll make a positive impact for their brand. We want that protected. We also want talent to show up to calls. Okay, it should be worth their time. And if we want to buy one unit on their show for $400, they don't need to clear their schedule and sign up for a 30-day weight loss program to talk about it. That's not reasonable for us to expect as buyers. So there should be boundaries. There should be limits. But why do we have to get so carried away? Why do we have to be so all or nothing? Can we say, hey, look, if you want to buy a pre-produced unit, this is your rate, and this is how this works. And if you need to insert your own ad, fine, we have a place for that. But we also have a place to continue the stuff that brought us here, the personal connection and authenticity. That's what brands need. That's what's going to keep this industry afloat. Otherwise, we're just trafficking display banners. But I think we all are here because it's more important than that. Don't make podcast radio, guys. Please, listen to what you're creating and ask yourself, are we just going back in time? Does it always forever have to be, stay tuned till after the break when we're going to continue the discussion? Can we not create ways to extend the content and not make people listen to 8 ads that are probably all for the same sponsor anyway? I think we can do better. So these are our 3 asks, and long live the revolution. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate your time.